Have you been told that podcasts are only good for building community and nurturing your current audience? I recently saw a thread saying that leveraging your podcast for lead generation is not sustainable, which is far from the truth. So in today's episode, I'm walking you through my exact process for creating a podcast sales funnel that generates quality leads and nurtures and converts those leads into your paid offers. All right, let's jump into today's episode. Hey, mama. Welcome to Marketing Without Socials for Moms, the go-to podcast for moms in business who want to stop relying on social media to build their business and build it in a way that fits their current season of life. I'm your host, Andria, a wife, mama of two, and visibility strategist for moms. Each week, I'm giving you the inside scoop on how to increase your visibility, leads, and sales through podcasting, email marketing, and collaborations. Ready to truly make social media optional in your business? Grab your chai tea latte and let's dive into today's episode. Hey, mama. Happy New Year. I'm super excited about this episode. I realized that I've never really talked about podcast sales funnel, and I really want to talk about, creating a podcast sales funnel because I've seen more and more talk in the online space where people are pretty much saying that, podcasting is just for building relationships. It's just for nurturing your current audience. And that could not be further from the truth. Like, my podcast has literally served me in every single stage of the sales funnel. Everything from lead generation to nurturing to conversion, going from that awareness stage to, that engagement/evaluation stage to, the actual sales, like where you're seeing the conversions and all of that. And so I'm going to walk you through how I create a podcast sales funnel, but also this is the exact same thing that I teach my clients. So let's get into it. The first thing is, what is a podcast sales funnel? So essentially a podcast sales funnel is the same thing as a funnel. So I've already kind of shared a little bit, but it's really just a regular sales funnel, but it's creating strategic content that one creates awareness, meaning new listeners are exposed to you and your podcast content, then encourages that engagement and building trust and starting to get your listeners to kind of evaluate like, okay, this person has a solution to my problem. Are they someone I actually want to work with? Are they someone I want to invest with? And then moving them to take action on your offers, helping them to make that decision to move forward with investing with you. And so you can create strategic pieces of content that essentially moves people along your funnel, like with your podcast. And so that's what we're talking about today. And before we get into like the overall breakdown of it, I wanted to share that I created a new offer. It's called Podcast with Strategy, and it supports you with turning your podcast into a sales funnel. And so in 3 or 6 months, depending on which option you choose, because you can either do the 3-month option or the 6-month option, we will map out strategic podcast content that meets listeners at each stage of the funnel. So it includes done for you keyword research, which is part of, I'll be talking about in a little bit, how podcast SEO actually helps with that awareness stage. But it includes done for you keyword research. And in addition to that keyword research that I do for like the topics we plan out together, you're also going to get a bank of 20 keywords. And then you get podcast SEO training so that you can continue with this after we work together. Unless you want to sign on and work with me longer, that is an option too. And then you get coaching and consulting. So on really understanding like your podcast analytics and understanding them beyond podcast downloads, because downloads don't tell you much. Those are vanity metrics. And then just support with getting feedback on different aspects of your podcast. So if you script or outline your podcast, you'll get feedback on that. There's also monthly strategy calls and everything. And there's so much more. Like, I'm so hyped up about this because I see so many people start podcasts and they do it without strategy. And even just with clients that I've worked with in other aspects. So like in the accelerator and other like one-off strategy sessions and stuff, the thing that I see that's reoccurring is that they feel like they have no strategy. They feel like they're winging it. They're just throwing stuff out there and pretty much throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks. And so I want you to confidently build a podcast that is a strategic part of your marketing and sales and have it serve as a funnel, not where you're just going to drive your current audience to. No, where you are generating leads, you're nurturing those leads, and you're converting them directly from the podcast. Like I said in previous episodes, 2024 was the year that my podcast made me the most money in my business. Like the majority of my sales, they came from my podcast. And so you can have a podcast that serves that for you, that brings in those leads and nurtures them and converts them, and doing all of it without you having to post online daily. Like simplifying that aspect of your business. Now, this isn't to say you aren't going to have other marketing platforms, because I am a firm believer in having a omni-channel presence, meaning you are on more than one platform. But when you have those seasons of life where you do need to take a step back from another platform, your podcast can continue to work for you. It can continue to bring in new leads. It can continue to nurture your audience, and it can continue to sell for you. So that is what we're doing inside a podcast with strategy. This is a one-on-one coaching and consulting offer. You can learn more at mamaturnmompreneur.com/podcast with strategy. This is linked below in the episode description and in the show notes. Okay, so now I'm going to walk you through my approach for setting up a podcast sales funnel. Now, like I said, this is the exact same approach I walk you through and support you with setting up, your own when you join Podcast with Strategy. And this is the exact approach I take with my podcast. So one thing you're going to notice as I'm going through, this podcast sales funnel is that there's going to be some overlap with some of the content types. And the nice thing about this is that a single podcast episode can serve people at different stages of the funnel. You can have an episode that's geared towards like the evaluation stage, the engagement stage, but also that same episode can support people who are, now they're at that decision stage. Now they're deciding whether or not they're going to move forward with you. And so that's the nice thing about this podcast sales funnel. So the first stage of the sales funnel is going to be your awareness stage. This is your top of the funnel. And so I like to call this the thought leadership stage. And the reason why is that this is where you're going to capture people's attention. You're going to make them stop and think. I'm thinking about just recently, a client was sharing with me how when she first came into my world, what really drew me to her was how I was saying that you don't have to rely on social media to build your business. There are other ways. And it made her stop and think. It made her uncomfortable because she'd been in business quite some time, been in business longer than me. And it was drilled in her that she had to have social media, that she had to be on socials, that it had to be, a main part of her marketing strategy. And I came in and said, no, you don't have to do that. And so it made her stop and think. And so, and this was actually from her, she found my podcast. And because it triggered her so much, she kept listening and ended up becoming a client. And so that is what you want your content to do. You want it to capture people's attention. You want it to make them stop and think. And really the focus here is visibility and lead generation. This is where you're bringing in new listeners, AKA new leads. And you really want to make sure you are leaning into your thought leadership because you want to call in the right people, the people who truly need what you have to offer, who are going to mesh well with you, who are going to vibe with you. I talk about that a lot on the podcast about, people are really looking to invest in people they vibe with, they connect with, that they actually like and trust. And so that's what you're going to do here at that stage. So outside of the type of content you're going to be creating to bring in those leads, one of the things that's really important here is your podcast SEO. And so that's another unique piece to this with having a podcast sales funnel. You can leverage SEO as part of your visibility and lead generation. It really helps people who are like actually searching specific questions, searching specific answers. It helps them to find you because you have the solution to their problem. And so this is where you really want to make sure you're incorporating the right keywords. So those keywords that incorporate the language that your ideal person is using. And so you're going to incorporate SEO into like your show notes, having your show notes hosted on your website. That's huge. That's another way for people to find your podcast. When they're searching on Google and you have your show notes on your website, like as a blog, yours can come up. I've had this happen where one of my podcast episodes, I was typing in a keyword because I was searching for something. And my podcast episode, the show notes came up as the top search. So you can leverage it that way. Your podcast name, this is huge. You need to have a podcast name that your people are actually going to be searching for, that has those keywords, not something cute, not something, cute, fancy, witty, any other. No, you need to be clear, crystal clear. And then your episode titles, your episode descriptions, your podcast description. Another trick that I use when it comes to SEO that I teach my clients is with your author name. Your author name for your podcast, you need to have your title. So like whatever your role is. So like for me, I believe I have like visibility strategist and a few other things. Again, those keywords that your people are searching, because this is going to help with that awareness stage. This is going to help people find you, find your podcast. So that's the first part of it. Then the other part is, okay, the type of content you need to be creating for this awareness stage. So I've talked about this on the podcast before. I can't remember what episode it was, but I will link it in the show notes. But treating your podcast as a resource library. So you want to create those core pieces of content that answers your ideal listeners' main questions, the questions they are searching right now. So these are your FAQs. You want to have pieces of podcast content that addresses those different questions. And do not, I repeat, do not lump all of those questions into a single episode. Because one, it's going to make it difficult for you to name the episode, especially because people have different types of questions. But also you don't want to just word vomit at people. So if you can create an episode for each question, again, that boosts your visibility, but also it's going to meet people where they're at. It's going to help people who they're searching specific questions. And so the question they're searching for, it's going to come up. But you want to create, like I said, this is your podcast resource library, answering those main questions. And then these are the episodes that you can share and comment on threads and in Facebook groups. So one of the things that I do and I teach my clients, and this is something I will teach you inside a podcast with strategy, is when you're scrolling threads, when you're scrolling Facebook, if you come across somebody asking a question that you have a podcast episode on, you just pop in and say, hey, I actually have a podcast episode on this topic. Can I send you the link? Or if it's somewhere like Threads or Facebook group that allows you to post links, here's the link to it. Take a listen. That has done so much for me. in growing my podcast audience. So generating those leads, but also signing clients, because I have a whole entire episode on that very question that they have. They get to demonstrate or experience who I am, my teaching and coaching style. But also they'll get to hear how I have a solution. So yes, I answered your question, but if you want more individualized support, this is where you get it. So you want to create those core pieces of content that will do that for you. So this is why I am really big on this idea of treating your podcast as a resource library. Now, no, this isn't the only type of content you create, but these are core pieces of content that are going to do so much for you. And kind of just give you an example. So I worked with a client who, before she worked with me, she was leveraging YouTube and Instagram to generate leads and sales. So she was a STEM teacher and coach who had a TPT shop that, provided lots of STEM resources for educators. And so when we added her podcast to her lead gen and marketing strategy, she doubled her sales in just 3 months. And here's how she did it. One, she was leveraging podcast SEO to grow her audience with the right listeners. But the other thing we did was really map out podcast content that created a resource library. So all of those DMs, she would get lots and lots of DMs with different questions and would find herself repeatedly answering the same question. And so instead of continuing to answer those questions in the DMs, she recorded a podcast episode and was able to direct people to the podcast episode. And so by doing that, she was able to create this resource library so all of the DMs that she was getting about her products and best practices for STEM classrooms, she saw a boost in her audience growth and sales. And even though this was the same type of content she was already creating on her YouTube channel, even demonstrating, utilizing the different products and stuff, her ideal clients were finding her via her podcast because that's how they enjoyed consuming her content. They were educators, they were on the go, and so they needed content they could consume on the go. But because she built up that resource library, her podcast began doing the heavy lifting for her. She saw that boost in sales. So the other thing is outside of the podcast resource library, there's other type of content you want to create for this stage too. So you want to create, your problem awareness content, making people aware of what their actual problems are, or even demonstrating that you see their problem, you understand, you get it. That relatability content. So demonstrating that you understand their problem and have been there and supported others where they currently are. Content that really highlights what makes you different from others in your industry. Mindset shifts around their problem in your industry. And I feel like this one is huge, really tackling this head on. So to give an example, one of the things I see so many podcasters who are business owners get caught up on are their downloads. They feel like they have to grow their audience to start seeing sales. And no, you can make sales with a small audience, but also downloads don't tell you much. Just because someone downloads your episode does not mean they're listening to it. There are other more important metrics that you need to be focusing on to make informed decisions about your podcast. And so that's why you always hear me talk about this. Stop getting so caught up on your downloads. I feel like people think they need thousands and thousands of downloads, but the reality, even when it comes to social media and your email list, more does not mean more sales. If you cannot convert the audience you currently have, you're not going to be able to convert a larger audience. Now, this isn't to say that you shouldn't try to grow your podcast audience because, yes, you want to reach more people. But if you're not making sales with your current audience, then you need to focus on improving that, improving your content, improving your call to actions. So that way you're seeing those conversions. Because if you see conversions with a smaller audience, you're going to see conversions with a larger audience. But if you're not seeing those conversions, growing your audience is not going to do it for you. Okay, the last thing when it comes to this awareness stage is the type of call to actions you want to do. So you want to do a mix of driving them to other pieces of content to be nurtured further, but also soft selling. So what I mean by driving them to other pieces of content, this is where you can, as your call to action, you can drive them to a blog. So if you blog, and maybe you have a blog that's connected to, the episode topic, you can drive them there. Your lead magnet, maybe you have a lead magnet that connects to that topic, drive them there or getting them on your email list. And this could be a lead magnet. Maybe you're hosting a free masterclass. Maybe you're hosting a challenge, just a way to get them on your email list. Also, if you have like a free private community, drive them there. But you want to get them engaging with other pieces of content to create more touch points. You also want to make sure, like I said, you still talk about your offer, but you're going to do it as soft selling. So an example of that is, say you're talking about one of your processes or frameworks or, giving a client example or something like that. You're going to mention what offer you supported that client inside of, or what offer you teach that specific framework or whatever. So just doing some kind of soft selling there. Okay, the next one is the middle of your funnel. So like I said, this is the evaluation/engagement stage. So this is where you're really looking to build more connection and trust. So at this stage, your listeners are starting to look at their options for support. And they're deciding on, okay, what they want to do about their problem, how they want to solve this problem. And so this is the type of content that will encourage your listeners to either send you a DM or an email, sharing how much your episode impacted them. This is the type of content that encourages that engagement. So this type of content is relatable content. So like I just mentioned in the awareness stage, you're going to do relatable content. You'll do relatable content here too. Sharing content that, really showcases like your values, your beliefs, your personalities. Content that shares your brand story or stories. And honestly, we all have multiple brand stories, right? Like there's many pieces to our stories because especially as we grow in our industry and, we're in business longer, there's going to be more to that story, right? So sharing those stories, but also demonstrating your expertise. Why are you the expert they need to hire? So highlighting your frameworks and your processes, giving them behind the scenes of what it's like to work with you, how you do things. So sharing those client stories, like walking them through where the client was before they worked with you, what happened when they worked with you, what was that framework or process that you leveraged? And then what happened after they worked with you? What were the results that they got? And then your experience even implementing your own frameworks and processes. And I feel like this one is huge because I don't feel like somebody should be teaching you to do something if they don't do it in their own business. So like this funnel, I do this. I do this for my podcast. And so I'm teaching you it because it's something I actually do and I see results on. And so I think it's just a part of that integrity piece. Like if you are teaching people a specific strategy or framework, it needs to be one that you're currently using too. Anyways, that was a whole side note. So for the call to actions for this one, you want to do a mix of driving them to your offers and then driving them to engage with you one-on-one. So sometimes you'll notice in my episodes where I will say, send me a DM letting me know your thoughts of this episode. Or if you've experienced this, send me a DM, share your story. That's what I'm saying. So like having them, send you a DM or send you an email or joining your private community and posting in that community, their thoughts on the episode or their experience with the specific topic you spoke on. Or if they have a question, like that type of thing, you want to try to encourage that engagement and to try to be able to connect with them one-on-one. So that is the middle of the funnel. Okay, so the bottom of the funnel, this is the decision stage. This is the sales stage. This is they're ready to invest, and the goal is to get them to move forward with working with you. So here you're going to be sharing more client stories and wins, sharing your, different stories. Like, I think sometimes we feel like we have to have like these super sexy or glamorous stories and whatnot, but it doesn't always have to be that. Like any type of transformation, like it's all good. So just sharing those stories and those wins, your own stories. So again, you experiencing wins and experiencing results from implementing your own frameworks and methodologies. The benefits and transformation of your offer. So this is going to be more hard selling. So really just flat out creating content about the specific offer. So like how I did back in December when I was doing that final push for the Social Media Detox Club at the current price, I did an entire episode on how the Social Media Detox Club will help you, I think, increase your leads in 2025, something along the lines of that. So that was a hard sell. That episode was for the people who had already been on the fence about my membership and they just needed that final push, like, yes, this is the offer for you. So being like that bold with it, like you can create episodes around your specific offers and how they solve a specific problem. Like that's the energy we're giving here. Problem solution episodes, objections. Yes, addressing those objections. And even with one of the things I'll say is too that you'll find that some of these you can even combine. So that episode that I did on the Social Media Detox Club, I also addressed the objection of not having enough time. And that really spoke to someone and they ended up joining the membership. So you can even combine these. Like it needs to make sense, but some of these you can even combine. But you definitely want to create episodes that speak to those objections, because when people are in that decision stage, this is where they start talking themselves out of the offer. Or they're going back and forth like, oh, well, what about this? Or what about that? So like if you can create content that speaks to those objections that they're, mulling around in their head about, well, you're going to give them that encouragement to move forward because you're going to show them like, hey, I know you're worried about this, but this is how, such and such offer supports you with that. Or this is how such and such offer helps you overcome that. So creating those episodes related to objections. And then for the call to action here, which I've already touched on, is hard selling. Like this is where you're just straight up hard selling, driving them to your offer. You're not sending them anywhere else. You are hard selling here. So one of the things I want to mention is with each of these stages of the funnel, so the content within each of these stages, you want to make sure you mention related episodes in those episodes. So what I mean by this, you will often hear me say, oh, I talk about this more in such and such episode. The reason why you want to do this is this helps move listeners along your funnel. So literally you can create more touch points by guiding them to the next episode they should listen to. This helps them move them down the funnel. So this is why you want to create episodes that are, kind of related, where maybe you mention your framework in an episode, but then you have a whole episode that really breaks down that framework. So creating those strategic pieces of content so that way you can go in and, as you're, share, like recording your episode, you can refer them to other episodes so that way you are guiding them down the path they need to go so that they convert. You can help speed that process along. So this is really huge. So this is something where you need to be keeping track, like having a system in place where you're keeping track of your episodes. So I just kind of give you a little behind the scenes here. I use Trello. And I have all of my old episodes on cards. So like I break my Trello cards down where it's like scheduled live episodes, and then it's like a certain number through a certain number. So I think I do it like from 1 to 50 for each card. And so as I am, planning out my content for future episodes, I will type in Trello like the search option for like certain keywords to see if I have any episodes on that topic. And so that way I'm able to include them in like my recording outline so I can make sure I mention them. Now, I didn't do it for this episode, but I am going to go back and link the related episodes in the show notes. But you want to get in the habit of doing that because, again, it gives people the direction, like the next step they should take. So maybe they're not ready to buy yet. Maybe they need to binge some more of your content. Well, you can direct them to the episode they need to go to next to get more nurturing and kind of help them along as they're making their decision to invest with you. Okay, so that is it for this episode. I know it was a little bit on the longer side, but this is a really juicy episode. Like, go back and listen again because I literally have told you how to set up your podcast sales funnel. But if you are looking for that customized support, when you join Podcast with Strategy, we will go through each of these phases in the funnel and map out content for each stage of the funnel. I have a content prompt document that walks you through planning content for each of these content types. So your podcast, I want you to know your podcast is far more than building community and nurturing your current audience. It can do more than that. It can serve you so much deeper than that. When you podcast with strategy, your podcast can serve as the top, middle, and bottom of your funnel, allowing you to attract, nurture, and convert your dream clients on autopilot. If that's what you desire, I highly recommend you come join me with Podcast with Strategy, coaching, and consulting. You will receive that individualized support to turn your podcast into the ultimate client magnet. If you want to learn more, head on over to mamaturnedmompreneur.com/podcast with strategy. Again, this is linked below in the episode description and in the show notes. All right, Mama, I'll catch you in the next episode. Hey, Mama. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to hang with me. I would love to keep the conversation going. So head to mamaturnedmompreneur.com/marketing without socials to join my email community. I share even more tips and strategies for building a business that doesn't rely on social media and one that fits your current season of life, as well as more behind the scenes of mom and business life. All right, Mama, that's it for today, but I'll catch up with you again next week.